Deep within the archives of folkloric research lies a case that challenges everything scholars believed about the origins of fairy tales. What appears to be an innocent children's story may actually document something far more sinister, a genuine encounter with forces that exist beyond the veil of our understanding. But before we reveal what happened, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. It was the winter of 1696 when Charles Perrault, a respected member of the French Academy, began documenting what he claimed were traditional folk tales from the countryside. His collection, published the following year as Histoires ou Contes du Temps Passé, would become legendary. Yet among these stories, one tale stands apart, not for its charm, but for the disturbing circumstances surrounding its creation. The story of Puss in Boots tells of a clever cat who uses supernatural cunning to transform his master from a poor miller's son into a wealthy marquis. What official records reveal, however, suggests Perrault's inspiration came from a far more troubling source than mere folklore. In the village of Barbizon, 40 kilometers southeast of Paris, local parish records from 1695 document the sudden disappearance of 3 residents over the course of 2 months. Each vanishing occurred under circumstances that would later mirror specific elements in Perrault's tale with unsettling precision. The first to disappear was Henry Moreau, a miller's youngest son whose family had worked the same grain mill for 4 generations. Witnesses reported seeing him in conversation with a large black cat near the mill wheel on the morning of his disappearance. The animal, described as unusually intelligent and wearing what appeared to be small leather boots, was observed walking upright on its hind legs. Father Guillaume Rossignol, the village priest, recorded in his personal journal that Henry had spoken of dreams where a cat promised to make him wealthy beyond imagination. The young man had become increasingly obsessed with these nocturnal visions, often found talking to shadows in the mill during the early morning hours. 3 weeks after Henry's disappearance, the local lord's gamekeeper, Thomas Leclerc, vanished while hunting in the forest surrounding the village. His horse returned without him, but tied to the saddle was a pair of small leather boots, each no larger than a child's hand. The boots were crafted from an unknown type of hide that seemed to shimmer with an oily iridescence in candlelight. The most disturbing disappearance occurred in late November. Marguerite Dubois, daughter of the village's wealthiest merchant, was last seen walking toward the forest at dusk. Villagers reported hearing her voice calling out, as if in animated conversation with an unseen companion. Her father later testified that she had been receiving gifts of exotic fabrics and jewels from an unknown suitor who visited only after dark. What connected these disappearances to Perrault's later story was discovered in the private correspondence of Father Rossignol. The priest had been documenting what he termed manifestations of the diabolic familiar appearing throughout the region. His letters to church authorities in Paris describe encounters with an entity that perfectly matches the characteristics of Perrault's literary creation. The creature appeared as a large cat, black as midnight, with eyes that reflected light like polished amber. It possessed the ability to speak in multiple languages and demonstrated knowledge of human desires with unnerving accuracy. Most disturbing were its feet, which bore not paws but small humanoid hands capable of manipulating objects with supernatural dexterity. Father Rossignol's final letter, dated December 15, 1695, described a direct confrontation with the entity. The priest had attempted to perform an exorcism, but the creature had merely laughed, claiming it served purposes far beyond the understanding of mortal clergy. The letter ends abruptly with the words, "It knows, I am writing this." The priest's body was discovered 3 days later in his church, kneeling before the altar in a position of prayer. No signs of violence were apparent, yet his face bore an expression of absolute terror. Most peculiar was the discovery of cat hair woven throughout his clerical robes, despite the fact that no cats were permitted in the church. Charles Perrault arrived in Barbizon in January of 1696, ostensibly to collect folk tales for his literary project. Village records show he took residence in the abandoned mill where Henry Moreau had lived. Local testimonies describe strange lights emanating from the mill during nighttime hours, accompanied by the sound of voices engaged in what seemed to be negotiations. The transformation in Perrault's circumstances during this period cannot be explained by conventional means. Prior to his visit to Barbizon, the writer had been struggling financially, dependent on modest patronage from minor nobility. Upon his return to Paris, he had somehow acquired wealth sufficient to purchase a substantial estate and gain influential connections within the highest circles of court society. More disturbing were the changes observed in Perrault's physical appearance and behavior. Colleagues noted that his eyes had developed an unsettling luminescence, particularly visible in dim lighting. His movements had become unnaturally fluid and silent, leading some to compare his gait to that of a prowling cat. Most unnerving was his habit of speaking to empty spaces, as if carrying on conversations with invisible companions. The manuscript of Puss in Boots, preserved in the Bibliothèque Nationale, contains annotations in a script that scholars have been unable to decipher. The unknown writing appears to be instructions or commentary, written in what analysis suggests is not ink, but a substance containing traces of organic compounds that should not exist in 17th century documents. Examination of the manuscript under modern forensic techniques has revealed something that defies explanation. Embedded within the paper fibers are microscopic hairs that DNA analysis identifies as feline, yet possessing genetic markers that match no known species. The hairs appear to have been integrated into the paper during its creation, suggesting they were present when the story was originally written. The tale itself contains details that could only have been known by someone with intimate knowledge of the Barbizon disappearances. The story's geography precisely matches the layout of the village and surrounding forest. The ogre's castle described in the tale occupies the exact location where Thomas Leclerc, the gamekeeper, was last seen alive. Most telling is the character of the princess, whose description perfectly matches that of Marguerite Dubois, down to specific details of her appearance and mannerisms that were never publicly recorded. The story's resolution, where the cat's master marries the princess and gains great wealth, seems to represent a twisted fulfillment of the promises made to each of the disappeared villagers. Research into similar disappearances throughout France during this period reveals a pattern of vanishings connected to reports of supernatural cats offering assistance to desperate individuals. Church records from 17 different parishes document encounters with entities matching the description of Perrault's literary creation. The Inquisition's private archives, declassified only in recent decades, contain extensive documentation of what they termed the Felidae conspiracy. These records describe a network of supernatural entities using the guise of helpful familiars to harvest human souls for purposes beyond mortal comprehension. The investigation was abruptly terminated in 1700, with all participating inquisitors either dead or missing. What makes Perrault's case unique is the suggestion that the familiar spirit succeeded in using literature as a means of expanding its influence. The widespread popularity of Puss in Boots has ensured that generations of children have been exposed to the entity's story, potentially creating a form of psychic connection that transcends the boundaries between fiction and reality. Modern paranormal investigators have documented increased reports of supernatural cat encounters in regions where Perrault's tale enjoys particular popularity. These sightings consistently describe creatures matching the appearance and behavior of the literary character, suggesting the story may serve as a form of summoning ritual when read aloud. The most disturbing evidence comes from psychiatric hospitals, where patients suffering from what appears to be demonic possession often speak of making bargains with a cat wearing boots. These individuals, from diverse backgrounds and geographical locations, provide remarkably consistent descriptions of their encounters, despite having no apparent connection to one another. What do you think really happened in that abandoned mill during those winter nights of 1696? Share your theories about whether Charles Perrault truly encountered something beyond human understanding. Subscribe to uncover more cases where literature and the supernatural intersect in ways that challenge our perception of reality.